Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah. And have you ever wondered, does he really love me? Is he just playing games? Does he really love me? How do I know what real love feels like? And we have a amazing dating expert, Antia Boyd, who is become a friend. And we have just connected so many times, and it's such a great connection every time. And I've been excited to have her on and talk about magnetizing your man and how to know if he loves you. Hello, how are you?
Hey, Sarah, I'm so excited to be here.
Yay! Officially, because we have so many like off-camera conversations.
Yeah,
So
right.
it'll be fun. Bring people into the party, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Let's actually turn the camera on. Just press the record button.
That's awesome. So give people a bit of background on what you do as far as magnetizing your man, and then we'll dive into the topic at hand.
Yeah, totally. So I've been helping tens of thousands of single women all over the world to attract the right men. And I find really like they either highly sensitive, and that's of course because they're attracting and then they attract narcissists into their life, or they had an emotionally unavailable parent like me. I grew up with a narcissistic mother, emotionally unavailable parent. And the stories of like, I'm not good enough, I don't want to be a burden. And then having that tendency to actually take on sort of that independent suit, right? Like, okay, well, I don't want to make myself vulnerable anymore. So I'm just going to become Miss Independent. And that, of course, backfires when it comes to dating, because it's like a total parts conflict, right? Because it's literally saying, love me, but don't get too close to me, right? And then they're surprised that they attract men into their life that are emotionally confused, also known as the emotionally unavailable man, inside of themselves. Right. So, and that's like where I help women like really, uncover like the emotions that they're suppressing inside of themselves, like also the shadows. We talk a lot about that. And like really how to become unapologetically yourself, setting boundaries without feeling guilty and overcoming ultimately your trust issues.
Yes, and I love that you talked about trust issues because um, i- there's this like fear-based choice, right? So we think like, oh, I'm the independent woman. Oh, I don't need anybody, as if that's like a confident choice, but it's really fear-based, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it for me, it actually started when I wanted to crawl into my mom's bed when I was 1.5 years old. And she said, don't bother me. So we actually have to see in that moment, like every time when we say, oh, we want to be independent, actually what we're covering up is don't bother me. And so
Mm.
since you can't just like show up with one thing without activating the other, you're also strengthening the fear of not bothering people, which then of course make you attract men that make you feel you bother them. For example, I have clients come to me all the time where the man has like a really complex life. Maybe he just got out of a divorce. Maybe he has a complicated child. Maybe he has like eternal hours at his work where he has to fly all over the place. But it feels to the woman, she is that sort of like that third wheel, you know what I mean? Somehow
Mm.
maybe you can fit me in. And she also has this feeling she can't really say anything because those are really good reasons. And she shouldn't be so selfish and so self-absorbed, which of course then makes her, because she's suppressing that inside of herself. That's why, and we know that of course from your podcast, she attracts the narcissist right to herself.
Well, and it's always funny when I say, okay, so what you're trying to do is be selfless so that your guy can be selfish. Is that what I'm hearing from you? Like, well,
Absolutely. And
that's
also what you may have noticed is also so when I look at some screenshots all the time of my clients' text messages, and so much over accommodation. Oh, if that doesn't work, then how about this? And oh, I can meet you here. And I was like, just give them one option and then see how it lands. Don't tell them already like I'm willing to jump through all the hoops and whatever. If we gotta make it work, we gotta make it work. Because the fear is that when you just write one option and they don't agree with that they disappear, that you're not even worth for them to come back, right? And say, hey, you know what? Like, can we drive separately, or can we meet half an hour later? And that comes from childhood, right? Because the little girl essentially never knew why the parent, it's like a guessing game, right? Like the dad is not giving her the attention, or the dad is always gone, or what the mom, and they don't know why. So they just throw options against the wall. Oh, maybe if I'm like nicer, right? Or oh, maybe if I'm more patient. And so because they don't know why the dad disappears emotionally, they then project that onto the men when they start dating, right? So like, oh, this could be already the reason. This could be already enough for him to disappear, that I just gave him this one option that doesn't work for him.
Yep. Over accommodating. I mean, it's so prominent. Yes. Don't do it. Don't do it. Well, we know we have a little bit of background on what it looks like to be with someone who's complicated or emotionally unavailable and that piece of it. What does it look like if a guy really is into you, if things are going well, if he's showing up in a loving, best sense way? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the 5 things a man will actually do if he loves you authentically. And the first one is actually my favorite, because he will celebrate you at your worst. Because one thing I always say is, and by the way, we usually hide our worst when we go on a first date. We laugh over when we feel embarrassed, when we feel insecure, when we feel shame. And we don't understand that that's actually what makes us attractive to the man. The man, as a matter of fact, doesn't even mind that you feel insecure. But what he does feel like a little bit confused about is when you're trying to hide it, when you're trying to cover it up, because he's like, what, like, am I just making this up? So maybe he's just making it up, right? So now all of a sudden he doesn't trust himself, but he will actually celebrate your worst. To give you an example, when I was dating my husband, I always joke because I was the biggest bitch the night before he proposed to me. So that showed me that's like your ultimate celebration, right? Instead of saying, well, you were just the most angry hog, you know what I mean, monster, rage monster last night. I don't think I'm going to propose anytime soon, right? So instead of punishing me, he actually, quote unquote, rewarded it, right? And it's because he knows that's not my normal. That's like my worst. And it's also authentic, because we're always wondering, Sarah, right? What is the worst of the person? Like, what can I, you know, like, I don't know if you did that with your husband too, but I did have with Brody. I said, so if you just like, if your ego would just go havoc and you would close your heart, what would be like your worst version of yourself, you know? And then like deciding, can I live with that, right? And he decided, totally, I can live with that. She would be a rage monster. I can live with that, you know what I mean? And also there's a lot of momentum when we express ourselves authentically.
I agree completely. And to say, honestly, say, my husband literally knows everything about me. Like, there is no secret. There's no hiding anything. It's been that way for a long time. You know, we've been together nearly 6 years now, but you know, it's been that way for a long time. And when you try to bring in what I call the representative at the beginning of dating, and all of a sudden they have to meet someone else, there's not a lot of trust built in that. And we certainly don't want that from the guy. Yeah, you bring in the mask and then you take it off. No, we don't want that. So we also need to be that when we go into dating, right? Leave the representative at home. Bring your real self in.
And there's a really great dating documentary called Dating Around, which I thought drove the point home so incredibly well, because you could see when the woman was just, oh, so where are you from? And what are your hobbies? Like, you could see how there was a switch that turned on into the man's brain where he's like, oh, we're in performance mode. Oh, I went to Harvard. I come from New York originally, right? So you could tell that he was just sort of going into the functioning energy versus actually like feeling and connecting and building authentic rapport. Absolutely.
Awesome. So what is point number 2?
Well, you already started to mention it, but just he shares his secrets. And so what oftentimes happens is when a man is not really authentically loving you, he's actually protecting himself, right? Because, you know, if I share my secrets with you, you can use it against me. You know, you can, you know, or I can feel actually now like a weaker man because I can't hide it from myself anymore. Have you ever had that experience, right? Like, oh, I shared it now it's out, and now I can't even tell myself a lie anymore. And he wants to share all of his secrets with you because he wants to create that intimacy. He wants to really create that deep connection, right? This like absolute closeness that you can't have when you feel like there's something that you're holding back from the other person. And I think another reason why is also because we really create this unconscious loyalty towards a person, towards a woman that we're like really authentically in love with, right? We just really want to be like, here's all of me. I'm not hiding anything from you.
I love it. Yes. And really watch out for someone who's trying to zero in on your secrets, from the toxic person perspective, right? If you're out and they're just like, because I've heard people say, oh, it's good that we're on a date and he's asking questions about me. And it's like, well, yes, that is good. But is he trying to collect information to later be used against you, or figure out your vulnerability, or figure out your secrets while he's holding his cards close to his chest? That's a dangerous thing. That's the opposite of what you're talking about, right?
Exactly. So this is actually about like him exposing himself, which of course a narcissist doesn't do.
Exactly. So what is point number 3?
Well, you love this one, but he lets you see all of his archetypes. So this speaks a little bit to what you said before, Sarah, that normally when we go on a date, maybe you see the warrior, right? Like I did all this work and I worked for HP or whatever, right? And then maybe you see the lover, little boy, like a little fun, flirty, but there's a lot of aspects that you don't see. And oftentimes you don't see them either because the man doesn't feel safe with you yet to be like, oh, I can't show her my edgy side because she may get scared, right? If she knows how sexual I am. So I'm gonna have to suppress that, right? Or, I have to see what she believes around spirituality. Like I kind of, you know what I mean? I'm just kind of waiting. Or like he actually doesn't get that reflected back from you, right? So he doesn't feel like you're as open. So however, whatever archetypes we step into, so let's say if I step into my queen, I'll bring out the king. But if I don't have the ability to step into my queen because I haven't done the work necessary, the self-worth work, then it's going to be really hard for me, and maybe even for him, to bring out the king, because it almost feels like this mismatch, right? So like he will feel safe to express. That's when men say, I'm surprising myself. That's when men say, you know what, like you make me a better man. That's what they're meaning, right? Like, oh, I discovered this part of myself, and I discovered this virtue aspect. I actually, see that I can do so much more, or, you know what I mean? That I've actually like a central side to me that I never allowed to come out because I was always the breadwinner and I always had to do everything. And you just allow me to be everything that I want to be.
Well, and I want to mention, you talked about being the queen and bringing it back to the, I'll just be so flexible that, I won't ask for anything. I see a lot of women going into dating as the beggar.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I hope you like me. I hope this. Yes. And when you end up when you come in as the beggar and then end up with a controlling person, right? There's a really unhealthy dynamic there.
Oh, absolutely. Because especially if they love that you feel inferior, and it keeps them in a sort of the superior position because they can tell that you are that you put them on a pedestal, and they're like, hey, why not? If I can get away with the cookie, like, why wouldn't I? Yeah. You know what I mean? If I can get more attention, particular with narcissists, I mean, half of my women, at least 50% attract real narcissists into their life, covert and overt. And it's really about like, you become so interesting for a narcissist, and you actually want to become a narcissist repellent, where the narcissist is saying, it's too much work. I constantly have to do all this work to make her feel inferior. I got to find somebody who like naturally puts me on a pedestal, right? But this is, again, this whole don't bother me. So that's why you have to do the shadow work. You have to be willing to bother people. I even still do it sometimes. That shows up in different areas, obviously not in dating. But I'm like, babe, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to email again that same person, and I'm just going to breathe through it, because I know there's this part inside of me that feels like I'm probably going to bother the person that probably get like 100 emails a day or whatever the case may be. And so that's like, how much can you actually create situations inside of yourself where you almost like actively move into a space where there could be a story of like, oh, you bother them, comes up, right? And what Tony Robbins says, and we both know Tony Robbins, Sarah, is right, like, don't you want to be bothered? I mean, if somebody is creating incredible state change for you and you're just sleepwalking down the road and your life doesn't have any meaning and any passion, and somebody bothers you and interrupts you, don't you want to be interrupted? I mean, I would say yes. So to also reframing that bothering can actually be a good thing. That actually oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Well, it's also costing women financially, that idea of like, I don't want to bother people, because then you don't want to bother your boss about being paid for what you're worth. You don't want to bother, another deal coming. You don't want to bother a customer you probably should reach out to, right? So there's a emotional cost to not bothering people, and there's a true financial cost. And you've probably seen the same thing I have after women working with me and they're making more money, but it's that piece of learning to ask.
Absolutely. And also stepping into their purpose, and also maybe even bothering their family, because the family, wanted them to have a certain position at a company, but they always wanted to have their own enterprise, they wanted to have their own coaching business or whatever it is. So I always say, I went to this one training, it was years ago, and like everyone was so bored out of their mind. Everybody was making the offer on the microphone for 90 seconds. I think we all had, and it was 100 people and making the offers.
Wow. Interesting.
And I just took the mic, Sarah. I just said, wake up. Right. And I do you think that bothered some people? Like it did. And I actually got somebody reached out the next day, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I didn't really ask you for your feedback, because I just felt like that's what needed to happen in that moment for me to come back alive, and for me not be like sleepwalking and just do another thing, right? And then the other piece is when somebody comes back to you, to not be apologetic, to actually learn to advocate for yourself. Like you're your own lawyer, right? We're hiring lawyers, you're fortifying yourself. So when somebody challenges you, well, you bothered me. Don't go into a shame shield and say, oh yeah, you're so right, and I'm so sorry. Oh, no, it was just a joke. You know what I mean? Like, I don't normally do that. I just had a drink too much. And no, but to be, I hope it helped you. It helped. I hope it shifted something for you.
When you're talking about self-advocating, and this morning with my son, I took him to breakfast and I said, do you want to just eat here at breakfast? Do you want to just eat together and have a little time together? And he goes, sure. And he's a real people pleaser. So he went, sure. And then he said, actually, I want to go to school early. And I said, okay. And then we got in the car, we were driving. I said, I'm really glad you told me that you wanted to go to school early. I want to know what's honest, because apparently they were playing like touch football. They have recess before school type thing. And, okay. But even that early implementation of those little tiny things. So maybe now that doesn't look like asking a boss for a raise or, asking for a deal, but hopefully those building blocks, which we missed as kids, probably. It was like, no, I should just do what my parents say all the time. And we really miss those building blocks of not bothering people or really asking for what you want.
Yeah. And really being sort of like that mirror for your child and saying, hey, I noticed a little hesitation in your voice. Are you sure you're okay with that? So to really training kids, like at least express your opinion, right? Even if we get our kids or our partners to the point that even if there's still a compromise, but at least if there's always a training, they always express their opinion versus like already like expressing it in a compromised way. Right. Where they then at the end of the day, Sarah, and I'm sure you know that with women who are like, oh, I didn't even know what I needed. I figured it out 2 days later. Right. Like, because I was so focused on the other person's needs and, you know what I mean? There was so much going on with them. And then it's like, what do you want? Oh, I don't know. And then some women get angry because they're like, it's fine, whatever. It doesn't really matter. And it's like, no, it actually does matter, but they don't want to step into that discomfort, into feeling I have freaking no clue what I need. Right. That's like the late emotional response. I had a girlfriend like that, and she would drive me nuts because she wouldn't say anything for days. And then like a week later, well, what you did last week, that was so offensive to me. I was like, wow, a whole week later, right? Because her system didn't feel safe. She had it's a trauma response, because it goes into freeze first in that moment, because it doesn't feel safe in the presence of another nervous system. So it just goes into freeze, right? And then it, like, once it's by itself again, it starts to sort of like unthaw, you know, it's like, oh, there was something that, you know what I mean? Like ruffled me the wrong way.
Well, and I'm always amazed at like women who want to be loved for themselves, but don't want to get to know themselves. And it's like, well, how can someone love you for who you are if you don't know who you are? That's really setting someone else up for failure, and the dating process up for failure, and a long-term relationship up for failure. It's like, I want you to love me for who I am, but I don't know who that is. So you figure it out for me and tell me, and then that's who I'll be. And it's like, what? No wonder we're getting in toxic relationships.
Or right, or like, I want to be seen for all of who I am. It's like, well, do you show yourself? Like, how many emotions are you suppressing? Right? They're always like, well, I want to be accepted for all of who I am. Well, are you receiving yourself for all of who you are? Are you bringing at least some intention of acceptance to those parts?
Right. Yeah. It's important work, right? But it's so worth it. It is so worth it. And I know you and I have talked off the podcast about like, no, our relationships are great. It really is easy. Like, it's really fun. It really is easy. It's really possible. It's really great. It really is. Like, all the time. I mean, it's not perfect, but I almost hate to see these Facebook posts and stuff be like, well, our relationship wasn't perfect. It was a lot of hard work. And I was like, it's not really that hard.
Right. I know. I'm like, should I say it or should I not say it? Because, you know what I mean? And they get upset at me and all the things, you know what I mean?
But I want our listeners to know, because I know you and I have had that conversation about, there is another side. When you do that work and you show yourself and you work through those emotions and you work through that shadow side, and you don't bring your representative, and then you may have to go through a few frogs before you find your prince, but there's absolutely that hope at the end of the rainbow for you, right?
100%. And I think maybe, Sarah, you know, that's a good point, because a lot of women don't have role models. I had so many women come to me and said, I've never seen a healthy, interdependent, deep connected relationship where that's mutually respectful and where the woman feels cherished and supported. I've never seen that before. So it may also be because we don't have the healthy mirrors. And so we have to become the healthy mirrors if there's no healthy mirrors around. Or take Sarah, me, Google it. You know, I always say whatever I needed inspiration for, I would be like, where are the stories? The stories are there somewhere. I'm trying to find magazine articles, interviews, whatever, right? So if you look for it, you'll find it.
I love it. So speaking of looking for, so as we are looking for these guys to love us, what is your point? Are we on point 4?
Yeah.
Okay. Point 4. What is our point 4?
I love this one, because you know right away you're not dealing with a narcissist, is because he protects you in your absence. So this goes really a long way, because this speaks again to this like unspoken king-tegrity, I call it, and the unspoken loyalty. So if let's say you were friends and Susie's at home or she's at work or whatever, right? And they're like, well, you know, I didn't like your dress last week, if she was wearing, you know, or like, you know, she didn't have to make that joke. Like the man is really saying, hey, you know what? Like, whoa, cut it. Is this person in the room right now? I don't appreciate that. And it's almost like they're like a team, right? So if they're offending her, they're offending him, you know? So there's like this togetherness thing. And I think that really speaks volumes, because that's about having really the energetic connection, the emotional connection, the physical connection, and not like out of sight, out of mind kind of thing, right? And also that shows that the man is a secure attachment style, because a secure attachment style doesn't have any sense of like needing to prove himself. Because men who would take that as an advantage would be people like, oh, finally, because I've always been feeling not good enough with her. Like now I can, you know, now I can be like, yeah, you're right. You know, just, you know, I mean, it's my wife. She's like always, you know, she's not the best fashion person on the planet, right? Because then he gets to kind of feel good about himself if he has insecurities, right? He can create this false sense of superiority. But secure attachment styles, they don't need that because they already feel that inside of themselves. And so they don't need a compensation for that. And for them, trust is so important. You know, trust is really like when what you think, what you say, and what you do is in alignment. And he's really saying this, there's too much on the line for me to gossip about someone else.
And at the same place, in our society, there's a lot of really more when it was in the sitcom culture. We've moved mainly past sitcoms, but it was so just like you saw couples joke about their spouses all the time and really belittle their spouses. Like, oh yeah, well, he can't even dress himself, or, yeah, of course she doesn't fit in those jeans anymore. And it was, it always got laughs, but it's really horrific to see in real life. It makes my soul cringe when I hear people do it in the presence of one another or in the absence of one another. It's just a very, very bad sign if you're willing to make fun of your significant other. It always makes people look terrible. I can't figure out why they think it's acceptable. I mean, it's just so terrible to me. It's really terrible.
I mean, like I said, part of it could be codependence. It could be actually a people pleaser. It could also be sort of when they observe condescension in their households, maybe not physical abuse, right? But like sort of like silent condescension, where like, oh, hey, your mom knows I don't mean that, you know what I mean? Or just like, every relationship needs a little bit spice, can't be everything nice. Well, then we're dealing with something like a little bit stronger, because that means that person doesn't feel safe with that level of love, right? It's almost like, well, I gotta like, you know what I mean, rip a little apart here or there. And instead of like expanding on their archetypes or stepping outside of their comfort zone to create that spice, right? Like they're trying to do it in a way that's like disrespectful and cutting.
It's like not being creative enough to have fun in the relationship. So you have to make fun of each other in the relationship.
Yeah, it has to be at the cost of another person, right? Like very uncreative.
Ugh, boo, boo. Okay, point number five.
Well, the last one is he introduces you to his world. And I think this is a good point, because I have a lot of women that come to me, I never met his friend. I don't know his friends. Like we've been dating for 6 months, and he goes home for Christmas, the holidays, and I don't think his parents know that I exist, right? But when a man really loves you authentically, he wants to share you. He's so proud of you, and he wants all of his friends to be just as happy too, because he wants to he already feels so happy. And so what do we want to do when we have already a positive emotion? We want to magnify it. We want to share it so we can feel it even more intensely, right? And we also want to, get like feedback from the friend. She's awesome. Isn't she great, right? Like, so there's like this engaging energy versus, just, I was dating guys where I'm like, it's kind of weird that I always have to leave right before the friends come. And like, it's kind of strange that we're not really going out. And so it's more the opposite, right? Like he actually he doesn't know what else to do, because he's like so enamored with you. And he wants to shout it basically from the rooftops, right? Because he's so filled with all this love and all this excitement and all this creativity and all this passion. And he's like, I need to express it like into many directions as I possibly can.
Well, I was thinking about that. And I think Ben met my friends on our third date. And within the first 2 weeks of our relationship, I had been to dinner with 2 sets of his best friends, one set here and a different set here. And so we just automatically became a part of each other's world in a really healthy way of like, and I was still at that point, third date. I want my feedback. I want your feedback on this guy. I don't want to end up in a bad situation. So I want to know, get your feedback on this. And just really grateful for that now. And I'm still very good friends. One of the girls that I went on the date with, her and I had dinner last night, and the other one, I think we're having dinner next week, so here 6 years later, still a part of that circle and feeling like those people are a part of our lives now. It's hard to decipher. We're no longer in, these are my friends, these are your friends, these are the people we do life with now. Very different than being hid in the shadows. I would not go for that.
And that's actually a good point, because when you meet your soulmate, then the next step is like, who's our soul family, right? So now you're actually bringing in the right reflections of the qualities of your relationship, the people who are like-minded like you, the people that keep you accountable to stay true, or to, or to talk things through. We're a little challenging with the boundaries. How are you guys handling that? Right? Like, then become, of course, the witnesses at our wedding.
I love that. That's awesome. Well, I have loved this whole conversation. Will you tell people where they can find more out about you and your work?
Yeah. So if you want to learn more about like, where are you particularly stuck, I recommend taking my free Magnetize Your Man quiz, and you can hop on over to mymquiz.com, and we can put that into the show notes as well. But it really help you to understand like, what are your vulnerability thresholds? Where are you disconnecting? How are you bringing in those guys so you can actually shift it and attract the men into your life that Sarah and I were talking about, like the kind of husband that you feel like, gosh, can it get any better than this?
Yeah. So if someone was listening, because this is my favorite question to ask dating coaches, is obviously, I bet you know what I'm going to ask you. Where are all the good guys? What is your response to that question?
Well, to me, it's actually there. I mean, I have heard stories everywhere. I mean, just really from gas station to, I would say, probably your mindset. You know what I mean? Because like, as the question shifted, as the focus shifted, that the women had, right, and asked themselves, how can I be even more aware of all the incredible men that are high quality and whatever other qualities you want, that are already around me, right? Out of the sudden, like, I had one woman, she got reached out on LinkedIn. The guy didn't even know why he reached out. God told him to do that. Not a creeper. They actually happily dating. Another woman who got reached out 20 years ago. So it's more about like, where's the man? It's really like in your alignment. It's really in your mindset when you get aligned. And I know you don't want to hear that. You want to hear, oh, just go to that newest online dating site. As a matter of fact, I just have that newest innovative link right here. Right. So we always want to have that quick fix. But the truth is, I've gone to so many posts like that, right? Like, hey, so what's the go-to? And everybody posts something different. They met their partner somewhere else. There is no, this is the highest chance for you to meet your man. But understanding, where is the flow for you? Where do you feel like there's this yes energy? You feel good about it. There's a lean in, there's an expansion, there's a curiosity. Go that direction. Don't go where you feel like, oh, I really don't want to do that. Oh my God, I'd rather stab myself in the eye. Then like open up another online, well, then don't do it, because that's the kind of men that you're going to attract on an online dating profile, is the kind of energy that you go into it with.
Love it. I love that answer. And yes, I've asked so many dating coaches and they all say they're everywhere, but and I think it would help, because I think it's like, oh, how do I, switch my mindset to get the right guy? And I think it can be helpful to switch your mindset to think, what mindset do I need to have a long-term healthy relationship? So it's not just about getting that guy, the same things that we're talking about here, and having your boundaries and not being the beggar and showing up as the queen, and not bringing your representative in, and all those sorts of things. Like, those are about how to have a long-term healthy relationship. It's not about, hey, where do I find a good guy to go on a date with? It's like, that's the version you and I have to bring to our relationships to keep them going well.
Absolutely. And then also, how can I feel safe to be loved? Because another thing I see with my women, particularly in the third stage of my process, is they finally attract a man and they can't stand it. It's so good. And they want to sabotage it. They want to ruin it because they feel, this guy can't really love me like this. I mean, I didn't, I didn't put the dishes in the sink. I wasn't the nicest person yesterday. And then he brought me flowers today. Like, I think I can't trust this guy. Like, I think there's something wrong. I think, and we need to end it. Right. Like, and this is going back to actually, how can you increase your capacity to feel safe, to be loved? I have lots of clients to deal with that challenge right now, Sarah.
I had that conversation with someone last night. That was the exact conversation we had last night. And she said, oh, this guy, it's going really well. And I was like, great. do not self-sabotage this. Do not. I said, I've got a great feeling about him. And it was that conversation exactly of increasing your capacity to feel safe and to let happy things in your life. And for after a toxic relationship, people can get really heightened into that drama. We get addicted
Yeah,
to problems and drama and chaos and, really needing to push away and have more of that safe, healthy energy where it's exciting, but it's not chaotic.
exactly. It feels more like a calm lake, right? So usually when
Yes.
people feel this like fireworks exploding, I'm like, no, this feels like really calm and almost like a little cool. And
Mhm.
it can even feel a little bit like slash neutral when in the beginning stages of recalibrating your emotional guidance system. Because the
Mhm.
emotional guidance system it feels the attraction when there's drama, but drama is like exactly what's not sustainable, right? Like what's actually sustainable. Because drama is, I always say drama's wits, like how wide can you go? Oh my God, so much variety. But actually, like when you meet a secure man, right, you go actually deep. And I
Mhm.
think that's where the resistance is coming from, because that nervous system of the woman is not prepared for that depth, right? And so what do? We like spit it back out, it's like a foreign body coming into the body, right? Like, oh, I don't know what to do with that. Or I feel like I'm not right. We always want to be right and in control. And that was definitely me. And for us to actually be, I'm not right. I don't know, but it's going pretty good with this guy, even though there's not this drama, or it's going really good with this guy, even though my heart is not beating a million miles a minute every single time when I see him, or I have sleepless nights, or I can't eat, but I'm just living my life and we're feeling good, right? I don't like the brain doesn't know what to do with that. It doesn't have a way to categorize it in the beginning.
Mhm. Oh, but I agree with you so much. And I remember someone saying, now that you're with Ben, does it feel like mountaintop, firework, crazy, something type of love? And I was like, no. And I don't want it to. No, it feels like consistent kindness. And there's obviously passion and adventure and all that stuff. I think people think, oh, if it's not like a Lifetime movie, the other option is boring. And it's
Yeah,
like, no, the other option is peaceful.
yeah. And you have a foundation to build onto that. You can say, oh, let's do something crazy this weekend, because you have this foundation together. You can take a risk together, So like that's the thing too. It's a little bit your fault too if you feel like it's just boring. It's also because, well, what are you bringing to the relationship? Are you trying a new recipe? Are you saying, you know what, we're
Mhm.
always doing that on Saturdays. Let's do something different. Or we're always
Mhm.
going out with friends. Let's do the opposite and stay home. So
Mhm.
that, like, you get to take on more responsibility when you're in a fantastic marriage that Sarah and I are in.
Yay! Well, I have loved this conversation and I am so grateful you came on here. Tell people again where they can find more about you and your website.
Yeah, so it's mymquiz.com. So that's my free Magnetize Your Man quiz. And then with
Awesome.
like whoever wants to talk more afterwards, like we can see if there's a match to set up even a call, we can have a chat.
Awesome. We'll have all that in the show notes. And thank you for helping us on our journey to becoming toxic person proof.